Today we are going to discuss 10 eccentric figures in history. The first is John Mad Jack Myton. Although he was a member of Parliament for Shrewsbury in 1819, he is chiefly remembered for his bizarre behavior. When John was only 2 years old, his father died, and he inherited a fortune consisting of $4.6 million, a great hall, and a yearly stipend of over $700,000. This afforded him the opportunity to engage in his various antics, earning him the moniker Mad Jack. Myton kept an elaborate wardrobe consisting of 700 pairs of boots, 100 hats, and 3,000 shirts. Myton kept numerous pets, including 2,000 dogs. His favorites among them were fed steak and champagne. Sadly, Myton enjoyed dog fighting and bred bulldogs for this purpose. He was even known to toughen up his dogs by biting them himself. One of the most famous stories involving him was the day he rode a bear through his own living room during a dinner party full of his guests. He also attempted to cure his hiccups by lighting his cotton shirt on fire, and he would also go on duck hunts in the middle of winter, naked in the middle of night. He was so fond of terrorizing his dinner party guests on their way home, he would don himself in full highwayman's garb, armed with pistols, catch up to his guests on back roads, and fire his pistols over their heads. Secondly, we have Francis Egerton. Francis Henry Egerton, a British eccentric, inherited a fortune and the title of 8th Earl of Bridgewater when his brother died in 1823. Educated at Eton and Oxford, the Earl forsook life in England to live with his dogs and cats in the French capital Paris, purchasing a luxurious hotel, which he renamed Hotel Egerton. According to the Parisian police, Egerton kept cats and dogs in his house, which he dressed as ladies and gentlemen. At a dinner party, the animals were seated at a table and outfitted with handmade leather boots on their feet and linen napkins hung around their necks, while their meal was served to them on a silver dish. On one occasion, when Egerton's 2 favorite dogs were misbehaving, he ordered that they shall wear for 8 days the yellow coats and knee breeches of my valets, and shall stay in the anteroom and be deprived of the honor of seeing me for a week. Egerton also clipped the wings of partridges and pigeons so he could shoot them more easily, supposedly due to his failing eyesight. Thirdly, we have Anna Maria Helena. Helena was an English noblewoman who used her wealth and influence to support the reform of women's rights. She was also an eccentric. Helena wore stockings to bed that were filled with squirrel fur and slept with the fur on her forehead, believing it would help prevent wrinkles. She also strung onions around her door to protect herself from infections. Helena would only eat food served on plates behind a 2-foot-high silk screen for reasons she never revealed. Helena believed methane had health benefits, and as such, she grazed cows below her window in an effort to inhale as much of their flatulence as possible. While in Paris in 1863, she saw a portrait of a young girl by the artist Ernest Hebert. She wished to procure the painting, but when she was informed that the picture had already been sold, she instead decided to buy the child model herself, whose name was Maria Pasqua. It is thought that Maria's father sold her for 2 bags of gold. Fourth, we have Emperor Norton. Joshua Abraham Norton was a resident of San Francisco, California, who in 1859 proclaimed himself Emperor of the United States and, several years later in 1863, assumed the secondary title of Protector of Mexico after that country was invaded by Napoleon III of France. Now, Norton even issued his own proclamations and decrees, which were ignored by both the Congress and the Army. In 1862, he issued a decree ordering both the Roman Catholic Church and the Protestant Church to publicly ordain him as emperor. Norton did receive some tokens in recognition for his position. In the 1870 U.S. Census, his occupation is actually listed as emperor. Norton was arrested in 1867 in an effort to commit him to involuntary treatment for his mental disorder. The citizens of San Francisco were outraged and defended Norton in newspaper editorials, which resulted in the chief of police releasing Norton and even issuing him a formal apology. Thereafter, the police officers of San Francisco saluted him as he passed in the street. Norton also issued his own money in the form of scrip, which was accepted by some restaurants in the city. He wrote to Queen Victoria suggesting the two should marry to strengthen ties between their nations. She never responded. He also wrote multiple letters to the King of Hawaii. Fifth, we have the Leatherman. The Leatherman, whose real name remains unknown, was a vagabond famous for his handmade leather suits of cloth and his trusty cane, who traveled through the northeastern United States in the latter half of the 19th century. He repeatedly walked a 365-mile route through western Connecticut and eastern eastern New York, with each round trip taking him around 35 days to complete. The Leatherman slept in rock shelters and caves, which he heated with fire during the winter. He was fluent in French. He communicated mostly with grunts and gestures, rarely using his broken English. When asked about his background, he would end the conversation abruptly. There are those who said that you could hear the Leatherman creak as he walked by, in his outfit weighing over 60 pounds. And there were other stories that you could even smell him coming by. He was known to approach local farmhouses to ask for food, but would always refuse shelter when offered. Next, we have Tycho Brahe, the Danish astronomer. His observations of the heavens are generally considered to be the most accurate of their time, and he made them prior to the invention of the telescope. In 1566, while studying at the University of Rostock, he lost part of his nose in a sword duel with his third cousin that resulted from a drunken quarrel at a party over which the two fought over who was superior in mathematics. This caused Brahe to wear a prosthetic nose made of brass. He also kept a tame elk as a pet. On one occasion, it was sent to entertain a group of noblemen at a dinner party in another town. Sadly, the elk died after it drank too much beer and fell down the stairs. Things get even stranger when we learn that Brahe employed a man named Jep as his personal jester. Jep had dwarfism and would sit at Brahe's feet when he was at the table, and got a morsel now and then from his hand. Brahe also believed that Jep possessed psychic powers. Next we have Torreira. He was a French showman and soldier, noted for his unusual appetite and eating habits. As a child, he was able to eat a quarter of a cow, weighing almost as much as himself, in a single day. His parents, unable to provide for him, forced him to leave home as a teenager. He eventually found work as a performer, amazing crowds by eating corks, stones, and live animals, including snakes. Torreira sweated heavily and smelled to such a degree he could not be endured within the distance of 20 paces. Oddly enough, despite his large intake of food, he did not appear to either vomit excessively or gain weight. He only weighed 100 pounds at the age of 17. Torreira was eventually employed as a military courier. A document was placed inside a wooden box, which he consumed. 2 days later, the box was retrieved from his excrement, with the document still in legible condition. He successfully demonstrated this ability to a group of commanders of the Army of the Rhine, for which he was rewarded with a wheelbarrow filled with 30 pounds of raw bull's lungs and liver that he eagerly consumed in front of the assembled generals. He was kept in a military hospital, and several times he was caught drinking the blood of patients undergoing bloodletting and was caught attempting to eat the recently deceased bodies in the hospital's morgue. After a 14-month-old child disappeared from this facility, he was immediately suspected and kicked out. Eighth, we have Karl Tanzler. During his childhood in Germany, Tanzler claimed to have experienced visions of a dead ancestor named Countess Anna Constantina von Kassel, who revealed the face of his true love, a stunning dark-haired woman. In 1930, Tanzler emigrated to the United States, where he found employment as a radiologist at the Marine Hospital in Key West, Florida. It is here he met his dark-haired beauty from the vision, a girl named Maria Elena, a local Cuban-American woman who had been brought to the hospital by her mother for an examination and was eventually diagnosed with tuberculosis. He showered Maria with gifts of jewelry and clothing and professed his love for her. Tanzler met with her at her house and, using his self-professed medical knowledge, attempted to treat and cure her with a variety of medicines, x-rays, and electrical equipment. Unfortunately for him and her, he failed, and she passed away a year later. With the permission of her family, he commissioned the construction of a mausoleum in Key West Cemetery, which he would visit regularly. Eventually, he removed her body in the dark of night and transported it to his own home. Here he assumed the responsibility of preserving her corpse with wax, plaster, coat hangers, and glass eyes to maintain her appearance. Tanzler slept with the corpse in his bed for the next 7 years. Eventually, a local boy witnessed the doctor dancing with what appeared to be a giant doll, and he was arrested for grave robbing. However, he was released when it was determined that the statute of limitations on the crime had expired. His ultimate plan involved flying Maria high into the stratosphere so that radiation from outer space could penetrate her tissues and restore her to life in some form. Next, we have Alexandra David Neal. She was a Belgian-French explorer, spiritualist, Buddhist, anarchist, opera singer, and writer of over 30 books about religion and philosophy. Her teachings influenced beat writers such as Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, and also the popularizers of Eastern philosophy, Alan Watts and Ram Dass. At the age of 18 in 1886, she rode a bicycle from Brussels to Spain without telling her parents. She also joined various secret societies and reached the 30th degree in the mixed Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. She was also the artistic director of a casino in Tunis for a few months in 1902. While in Tibet, she met a 14-year-old monk named Abher, whom she adopted in 1929, and he was her companion for over 40 years. Alexandra claimed to have created a tulpa. These were beings created through mental powers of the imagination. The beings would become real, acquiring their own sentience and mind. She believed her tulpa was a jolly, fat monk, which she later had to destroy. Alexandra stated, "Once the tulpa is endowed with enough vitality to be capable of playing the part of a real being, it tends to free itself from its maker's control." She died in 1969 at the age of 101. Her ashes were scattered in the Ganges River in 1973 per her request. Lastly, we have Edward Lesscaldin, a Latvian immigrant to the United States and self-taught engineer who single-handedly built the Coral Castle in Florida. At the age of 26, he was engaged to marry a woman named Agnes, who was 10 years his junior, referring to her as his sweet 16. Unfortunately for Edward, Agnes broke off their engagement, some said on the day of the wedding, even at the altar. This caused him to immigrate to North America, where he lived in Oregon for a brief period. After this, he relocated to Florida, where he lived over the next 30 years and spent those decades constructing a massive structure called Rockgate, which he dedicated to the girl who spurned his love so many years ago. He worked alone and mostly at night, in total having sculpted more than 1,000 tons of limestone into architecture and engineering marvel that would later become known as Coral Castle. Edward opened the landmark to the public, offering tours for 10 cents. When people asked how he had moved all the heavy stone on his own, he replied, "I understand the laws of weight and leverage." and I know the secrets of the people who built the pyramids, referring to the Great Pyramids of Giza. Edward also observed a strict diet of only crackers and sardines, and starved himself in his later years, eventually dying from a stroke in 1951. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment, and let us know what other eccentric figures in history that we have left out. Thank you very much.